Hello, and welcome to another episode of Not D&D. It's brought to you by EN Live, part of EN World, the leading tabletop news and review site. I'm Jessica, your host, but much more excitingly today, I have not one but two fantastic guests with me. Kieron, please would you start by introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Kieron Gillen. I'm a fantastic guest. I'm my day job is I'm a writer for mainly comics. So I write books for Marvel, Image, both characters I don't own, like who have I read? Like I'm writing the X-Men at the moment. That's a good example. And stuff like something like Wicked Divine and Die relevantly. And when I was doing this comic called Die, I was also working on a role-playing system based upon everything in Die. So that's kind of like my through line of who I am.
Fantastic. And Grant, we also have you here with us today. Would you tell everybody how you're involved with Die RPG?
So I am I write role-playing games for a living. I'm 1/3 of Rowan, Rick, and Deckard. I'm sort of the closest thing we have to a front man. We have two powers behind the throne.
Okay.
And so Mary Hamilton and Chris Taylor are like the people who do a lot of thinking, and I get pushed on stages and indeed streams.
Okay.
To do things like this.
Excellent. So like the company jester, if you will, then.
I think jester gives me slightly too much gravitas, but yeah.
Okay.
And also like I've written a bunch of games. I've written like Honey Heist is probably the most popular one, which I've done. But the reason I'm here is Kieron needed someone to turn his manuscript into a sellable book, and from what I can tell, we were already mates.
Yeah,
that's lucky.
I've been to Grant's house, but before we started working together, it's like I've been to Grant's house, so I, have ate his food.
Yeah. You fell asleep on my sofa that one time. Yeah. We're fine. Yeah,
that's the true mark of friendship, isn't it? Yeah. Eating food together and passing out on someone's sofa.
We never said passing out.
No, I did add that. I added that myself because that was my kind of version of the story.
Yeah.
But anyway,
it was passing out. Middle-aged gentlemen, I'll have you know.
It's okay. It'll be going out at 10 p.m. the live stream, so say what you like here after the watershed. But today we're here to talk about the Die RPG and this beautiful cover art I have here. And it's currently live on Kickstarter now. At the time of recording, because we're doing a pre-recording for this session, it's over 250,000 that it's raised, so doing very, very well. And you can check out the link there, which is up on the screen and also in the show notes if you want to have a look about what we're talking about as we have it in discussion. But before we get into talking about this beautiful RPG, which I have backed as well, first of all, I want to get into kind of your background in with RPGs and how you got involved with the project, which we briefly kind of touched upon. So Grant, what was your first ever role-playing game that you played?
The first
back in the day.
Back in the day. So the first one I ever played was in high school. It was a game called Zaibatsu, which no one's ever
heard. No, I've not heard of that one. Please tell me about that.
So I went to high school in Portugal.
Okay.
And so I didn't have a lot of. I didn't really learn a lot of Portuguese, and there's not a huge. There certainly wasn't a huge Portuguese role-playing industry in the late 90s and early 2000s. So what I do is on my dial-up internet, I would find any free RPGs I could and just sort of harvest them into text documents.
Okay.
And then read them offline. And one of those was off an Angel Fire website called Zaibatsu. And it frames itself as post-Gibson-esque cyberpunk. And I didn't know who William Gibson was when I played it, but I ran it for my friends, and I think in a move which would go on to define the rest of my life. Before I finished that first game, I started changing the rules.
Right, so started editing, designing, developing.
I would have been 15, and I was like, all right, boys, I've had an idea. Cool points. You do cool things. And cool points is pretty much my game design philosophy up until now.
Yeah, that does sound cool as well. So perfectly named.
I mean, you want to have them. It's like, can your next game be called Cool Points? It's just like, it just cuts to the chase. It's the perfect Grant game. I want to play.
I've been cutting to the chase for so long. I'd love to do a bit of chase. You know what
I mean? Okay. So Kieron, what's your background with RPGs? Like, what was the first RPG that you played?
Like, I'm proper old. I got a decade over Grant. So I was there when RPGs wasn't like first wave America or anything, but I was just like aware of it being cool and interesting. So the first thing I got, my parents bought me for my 10th birthday, the Middle Earth role-playing box set. Now,
Ooh.
MERPS is a cut down version of Rolemaster. If anyone who knows anything about Rolemaster, it's the game with all the tables and all the rules.
Right.
So you can imagine little 10-year-old me with my brother, who's like a couple of years younger, opening this box and just staring in bemused horror. So we basically spent our time, there were some maps and little cardboard figures, and so we cut out the cardboard figures and we pushed them around the maps and occasionally rolled dice and looked at the table and said some stuff. And that was my first role-playing game. And of course, over the next, let's say 4 years, I've slowly learned more and more of the system. So we've kept on playing MERPs, but increasingly something actually close to the rules rather than just what bizarreness we kind of come up. So that was my way in, like Tolkien, as always. And also wrestling with incredibly complicated rule systems for no reason.
Yeah, apparently it sounds like a very crunchy kind of system. That's really interesting, actually, because I don't think we've had two guests on at the same time where neither one of them's first game wasn't Dungeons and Dragons. So that's kind of gets you some cool points, if you will, I think.
To do a flip.
Oh, well, if you like. But Grant, obviously you do a lot of things in the role-playing industry. So how did you transition from being somebody that enjoys tweaking games at 15 with your friends to somebody that makes them for a living?
Much like Kieran, I used to be a games journalist.
Okay.
That was the closest thing I had to a career coming out of university. I graduated in 2008, just in time for the world to start going downhill. And so there were no jobs
the millennial
for writers.
Story, isn't it?
Yeah, there were no jobs for writers. But I managed to squeeze into being a sort of a lifestyle and games journalist. And unfortunately, my partner got hired to work for Guardian Australia. So I had to move to the other side of the world where I had no contacts and I wasn't legally allowed to work.
Wonderful.
So
always helpful.
we just sort of started, thankfully, we were getting enough money in, and Daddy Guardian was paying enough of our flat that I didn't need to work full time.
Nice.
And so I was able to start a little Patreon with I'm so lucky. I'm so thankful I had the room to experiment in a place where I wasn't going to starve to death if it didn't work. And it did work, and it was nice. And I think the first thing, we've always been interested in making things. That was the first role-playing thing. We were doing LARPs before that in a semi-professional capacity as well, but they're even harder to make money out of, it turns out. And plus you have to get everyone to a field for a whole weekend, and I like showers.
Events management, health and safety.
I had to write waivers.
And my previous career before bringing games was doing wedding planning and coordinating. So I can relate to all that side of events.
Congratulations on getting out of that.
Thank you very much. But can relate to that. But so you were in kind of LARP stuff, and then it moved to more kind of tabletop RPG things?
We did Goblin Quest, which was my first ever sort of published game through Kickstarter. And that was back in 2014, I want to say, back when Kickstarter was still this sort of untamed Wild West, and people were putting out like potato salad on there, so you could kind of do what you wanted. I did what I wanted. I think it made like 30 grand, I think, which was pretty
nice.
Yeah, pretty good for the first time out. And we haven't really looked back since then. We've we incorporated as Ryan Rook and Deckard, my partner who ricochetted me around the world. And Chris, co-author on Spire and Heart, and a bunch of other stuff. We incorporated a business. And thanks to Di, we're now a going concern, which is pretty exciting.
Excellent. Yeah. So it's doing it's doing super well at the moment. I'll just pop the art up on the screen for the live stream here. So cool. I mean, so let's kind of get into why we're here to talk about here. So we're talking about the Die RPG, which is listed here. So if you could give us a little elevator pitch on that, Kieran, how would you introduce this role-playing game to somebody?
Goth Jumanji. And that's the 2-word pitch. We can just quit and go home. That's the usual kind of way of putting it. But what you mean, it's kind of like people get a group of real-world, messed up, realistically flawed people get together, and you generate them. That's the game. First thing you do in the game, you make up some real-world, messed up people. They get together. They play a role-playing game. They make a character. They get transformed to a fantasy world and transformed into this character, this embodiment of their hopes and fears. And the entire world is echoing their messed up nature back at them. So, like, let's say you've got a distant relationship with your mother, and so the cold lich overlord might resemble your mother somehow. That's the very basic sort of example.
Okay.
This world full of all the kind of warped versions of stuff. You explore, you get through, and eventually you work out whether you can go home or not. That's the thing. It's like the players have to come to a decision. So that's the kind of structure. It's basically a game about discovering who these people are, and of course the meta question. I said the word meta. Grant throws a brick at me. It's
you haven't said card.
No, but that is the
Haven't said
perfect.
confusing yet, so-
That is the perfect word for this game, though, because I very much
Yeah.
felt that as well. I did feel it's very meta, so I'll say it for you, Kieran.
It's all right. I mean, like actually, Grant notes the real word is Cartesian, but I haven't said that yet. So we're saying it is meta. But you know what I mean? Like it's about why do you play RPGs? But at the same time, I mean, the thing I always sort of stress in the pitch when you say that is, oh, that's you know, if you say meta, but the real thing is just really, really human. What it is in that kind of like you're playing people, and immediately it's like you know what people are. You may not know what an elf is or how an orc feels about anything, but you know how people feel when they, you know, I was hoping to have a career, my entire life has fell apart. You know, and it makes it really easy to role play because you can just do that stuff. So immediately, despite all the trappings, it's still like a really emotional, fun thing to do. So yeah, that's Die.
Definitely. I mean, when I saw it, I really liked the idea of it because it seemed like it would be quite. I haven't had a chance to play it because I've just backed Kickstarter, but it seems like it'll be a very kind of cathartic experience almost. And when you say it's like messed up people in, it can be. It doesn't have to be something really extreme, like you mentioned in your examples. It can be something quite minor, like you don't have a great relationship with your parents, or maybe you've just been made redundant and you're looking for a new job in the sense of identity with your career, or so it can be kind of these mundane things that happen all the time, but for an individual are quite, impactful. So
it's in some ways, as you say, that the small stuff's the better. You know, it's the conflict between this really human minor detail and the fact you're now an 8-foot guy with a sword the size of the sword made of demons and whatever. You know what I mean?
And you get to paint it in this very big scale as well. So like, although like what's at stake here is actually your difficult relationship with your boss. What it's played out as is a fight with twin submachine guns as you slide down a destroyed tower into 200 demons.
Yeah, I won't work weekends.
Yeah.
And that feels like a more fun way to deal with our problems anyway. So, yes.
all role playing is therapy, and Die doubly so.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a statement.
It's what you're saying, Jess. It's like, it can be the catharsis is very real, but it's also can be very fun at the same time. And also both, it can be like catharsis, or you can play it lighter, or you can do it literally when you're doing both at once. Because you said there's nothing, as Grant says, there's nothing more cathartic than shooting your boss with a machine gun. You know,
the demon with the face of your boss, please.
Yeah. Sorry, I apologise.
I couldn't possibly say. Russ of EM Publishing is a wonderful boss who I'd never shoot. He's probably watching. But moving on to the game. So the inspiration behind it, it was a comic book first, wasn't it, Kieran? Because as you say, your background and your work is writing comic books. So that was how it started. So could you talk us through kind of the comic book and how that transitioned into you making Grant make it into a game? Or
I will say Kieran made it into a game.
Oh yes,
I'm here as an editor and a producer and a publisher. This is Kieran's thing.
Yeah. It's kind of it's one of these. It's weird because people always ask me what's it like to convert the comic into a game, but it's not really how it happened because I was developing them both at the same time, and the whole thing very rapidly became a conversation between the two medium. Like I make these kind of like weighty, slightly meta. Playful genre comics. So with Die, I was trying to do a book about why people play fantasy games anyway. I know that the world you go to in the actual comic is this kind of conversation. It's like you've got this empire which is based on Tolkien, but World War One. You've got this whole bit of the Brontes. You've got a whole other bit based on Prussian 19th century war games, and they're all in a critical war with each other. But it's really about the 6 lead characters and their problems, and can they make an agreement whether to come home or not. So it's a personality study, and it builds to this climax, and and then they decide to split and not go home. And then so it's all basically about their personal drama on a real scale. So the whole point was, I can do this as a game. In fact, this is very clearly a game structure. The rules are really simple. They go to a fantasy world. Everybody has to agree to go home. Everyone has to agree to stay. And very key, and dead people don't get a vote. There is a kind of we're very quite careful in the game of how the player versus player aspect comes in. It's normally only ever right at the climax, if even it does at all. To be honest, most games I play of Die are much more like eventually is that people go, okay, we've made an agreement here. As in, because the question is really what will you do to get what you want? Is one of those questions all the players face. Anyway, this is what I mean. It's like the whole things were done at the same time. So elements I made up for the game, like the Secret of the Fallen, it's like, okay, what happens when I play a character dies in Die, they come back as basically a zombie called the Fallen. So they carry on. So there's no player elimination. They carry on playing.
Oh, great. Okay.
But if he eats someone else, they become alive again, and that person is now a fallen. So in other words, it's a way of like that's a mechanic to remove player elimination, but it's also a really powerful element in the comic because you suddenly realise all these monsters you've been fighting used to be people.
How does that work mechanically in the game? So are the fallen then working against the rest of the party, or
it's one of those kind of open questions because it's meant to be they don't they feel the need to do it, but they don't but will they do it? And again, it's a question of what will you do to do it? And so some of my most important, and then it's a really difficult problem, and then the group decides what they can do. And there's maybe other solutions to get them back from being a fallen other than just noshing on your mates. But it is, especially because the game is based around one of the characters' faults. Sorry. One of the players, as in the GM, their kind of persona, their character, is the person whose fault is they're in the game in the first place. So there's at least one person several people might want to kill. So there's all you know what I mean. So that's kind of another aspect of the game. In fact, this is one of the things about Die. It's got so many little quirky things in there. Like I've completely I failed to mention until now the GM as a character. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like and the GM normally plays a class called the Master, and the Master is basically the worst portrait of a cheating GM. You basically get to basically bend the rules on the fly and occasionally cheat outright.
So someone who rolls the dice behind the GM screen sort of person. I mean, there's resources and rules about it. That stops you doing it just freely.
The fun will be precisely ordered as we say.
Yeah. I mean, the great job about the master classes, they've got these basically the judges of all reality, keeping an eye on them. So when they cheat, they're trying to avoid being spotted by the game cops. Essentially, it's like the old joke about there's no game police who's going to come around and stop you using the rules. Oh no, Die has game police, and they're going to murder your master. You know what I mean? And that's just like one aspect of the game.
One thing I'd like to touch on in terms of the adaptation, which I find really interesting, is that most adaptations come from a purely narrative property. And so occasionally especially when you're dealing in the sort of power levels that we're looking at in Die, characters will do something which is like it hasn't been established they can do that, or it doesn't make sense with their power level for them to do that. And one of the things which Kieran's very cleverly put into the game is everyone can break the rules of the game, and they have a currency for doing so. So if you want to do these sort of stupid, over-the-top, elaborate things, every character class has the means to make that happen, and they are generally punished in some way for doing it. But it's just a really nice way of like, and if the rules would stop here, then we can keep pushing up, and that's covered in the core text. And that's really nice to say. It's clear that it's been written alongside the graphic novel the comic book as it's grown. Yeah,
it's like there's all the classes basically. When I was thinking about them, they've got two sets of abilities, and they've got the basic set, which are much more like a standard RPG character's abilities. They're just like your gun can shoot, you can fly. They call it the basic verbs, and then they've got their special narrative level abilities. I tend to think of them as. And so they're like I mentioned the Masters cheating. You've got stuff like Godbinders. There's a good example. They're kind of like the cleric as a demonologist, and the idea that their basic abilities is like scripture, and they are basically essentially spells. So they've got a set thing they can do. They're much more like spells. And then they've got miracles, and miracles are literally anything you can talk your god into doing, and then your god gives you a cost, or ask you, I'll do that if you owe me a favor. And then down the line,
sounds very fey.
Yeah, exactly. And then then down the line, the gods the gods will call in that favor, and you'll go, and so every different class has a different sort of cost and benefit, and because that's the other aspect. I wanted each class to feel, despite having this backbone of all having the same sort of structure, they're all very individual in terms of the other characters won't quite know what exactly trouble you're in. And that's for me when I was playing those original games all the way back to MERPs. RPGs were kind of mystified, so I was into mystification. There's a lot about Die. Like every character in Die owns one of the dice. So no other player gets to play apart from the master touches the D20. No other player apart from the emotion knights touch the D8. And you know what I mean? So you're trying to lean into the weird magic items of dice as well. And and even the fact evil GM, that's like using 1980s satanic panic imagery. There's a lot of that kind of flirting around the forbidden fruit of gaming, which we can, since we've now won, we can actually play with that instead of being scared. At least that's my age showing.
No, that makes perfect sense. Could we maybe step back and dig into the rules a little bit? So if somebody hasn't had a look at the Kickstarter and is unfamiliar, from what I've seen looking through, it's the basic core mechanics is kind of a D6 dice pool system. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this system was quite important that I wanted to have a sort of objective world. Like I love player-facing mechanics, But in this case, since you're going to a fantasy world, and one of the key questions is it real? if the game defines all the characters in the world you go to as less real than the players, you've already got your answer. So I had to have like a sort of objective system, but it's so strict. But of course, to play at any speed, it has to be really stripped down. So it's a dice pool system. You roll your stat, number of d6s. You add dice if there's advantages, remove them if there's not. 4 plus is a success. You get, if you've got a class dice, as in your d8 or whatever, you get to add that as well. And that, of course, is red. It's the same. So it's 4. So in other words, if you add a d12, which is the Godbinder's dice, 4 plus is still a success. That's really easy to get success if you're using your miracle stuff. And the number of successes if you do it or not. It's kind of, that's the absolute core. And I was trying to make it like a really good soup is the way, really bad, the basic soup you would add ingredients to. You know what I mean? Like I want to do, stock, that's the word. Thank you. So like, and it's especially, here's an example of why I want it to be quick. It's like the dice pool system is both hit and damage. You know what I mean? So in other words, I'm cutting down the number of rolls because I know there's going to be more rolls because the players, the characters you fight will also be rolling. So that's kind of the course. Any quirks worth mentioning, Grant? I mean, like the special system is fun. Like
the specials is an interesting way of doing it. So rather than say crits, what we have in the game is specials. And so on a 6, not only is that a success, but you spend it to trigger a special. And these things function like special effects. So specials is a really clever name for them, but they range from your target catches fire and takes another hit next round to this hit ignores armor, to things like you look great doing this, or a parrot lands on your shoulder and makes friends with you. And so like these are defined by where the action is taking place based into like the genre of the area, what weapon you're using, your character abilities. And so I think I think like one of the most useful things about the system is the fact that it doesn't have a great deal of quirks. The quirks come from within the character classes, but you're always coming back to that core role, which means that you have the flexibility to get really fast and loose with stuff. Like if you decide that you want to have, let's say, just off the top of my head, a tank that is also a bull, and so it's does it have tracks or legs? We'll work that out. But it will be possible to improvise tank bull rules using this without really stopping to breathe.
So there's no like, hang on, let's check the rule book on this, kind of pause for 5 minutes in the game.
No.
Excellent.
It's like what we wanted the rule book was to be an inspiration. And all throughout, because Die is so much born of the characters' fears and desires and dreams, the book is giving you the tools you need to make something which is innately personal to each group, filtered through this Die filter of these are the classes, these are the stakes, on you go.
Grant really picks up the fact there's so much other stuff going on in the game. Having this core mechanic, which is simple and robust enough to fall back on, but with enough quirks to be interesting. Like the fact what am I going to spend my 6 on? Will I use it to hurt them more, or will I use it to look really cool? You know what I mean? Like there's enough little decisions there, but also it's good at abstractation. Abstract parts. In other words, you can do it in like your basic sort of D&D kind of like combat sort of system. Okay, this time we're going to go all the way out. We're going to use this dice roll to decide who conquers this continent. So like the dice pool system can move up in and out. There's lots of different ways of reading it, but it's never gets in the way. And for me, like for me as a GM, the second you have to start flicking for the manual, the immersion breaks. Downtime is so you want to basically roll dice. Have you succeeded or failed? Great, I'm excited. Next thing, that kind of the punch of stuff. And they also the pause. The pause. Okay, well, this is what this dice roll means, and now we're going to follow it through. So that's kind of the thinking of the system. It's like we talked a lot about something the point is we want it to get out of the way, but I think it gets out of the way in a good way.
To write rules that stay out of the way. It's really difficult. And also like rules which empower people. Because it's possible to make very light rules. I've written 61-page role-playing games, but whilst doing those in a way which are easy to remember and easy to use and feel natural and intuitive, that's the challenge. And we've worked super hard on getting our language sorted out. So it's like once you've run your first combat, hopefully you're pretty much set.
Because this has been a long time in the making. Because I think you said 5 years that it's been playtesting this game. Yeah,
like in various states. It's like I used to be a games critic in my previous life, and I've always kind of been a Sunday painter designer, like in video. Like I just occasionally mess around with a game design, never planning to release it, just to play. because it's fun. In fact, game design is very much like playing a game for me. You know, it's the same sort of, here's a challenge. In fact, it's especially like board game. You know, it's definitely got that kind of aspect to it.
Yeah.
So I was immediately playing. I mean, I had the cool idea, which is basically let us reiterate the structure of the Die comics. In other words, group of messed up people dragged into a fantasy world, and then the set rules whether they go home or not. So I knew what it was, and so I could start playtesting very quickly. And then again, iterate, get it. When it gets to a state where it's all written down, I give it out to people, see what's working or not. You know, lose mechanics which were frankly darlings that needs to be killed. There's some which I feel very bad for the bad dice. The bad dice was a mechanical fudge that you have to add a dice that is subtracts from your roll, and it's basically, and you had to ceremonially shame the dice in the game, and it's like no one ever uses this roll. This is pointless. It's funny, but it's pointless. We will get rid of it.
Oh, it's such a shame when you have to get rid of stuff like that. 'Cause you're like, but it's so cool, but it doesn't work. But
it doesn't do anything.
So cool.
So many injured mechanical horses, as it were, behind the stables, and just it's there's a lot of rules blood on my hands.
Well, maybe they can be resurrected as the Fallen, if you will, in another game. So you never know. Maybe they'll
nightmarish mechanical monstrosities.
It's just stuck together system that appears crawling out the back of the shed.
That is literally a dice scenario. Honestly, I've been thinking about like doing the return of the bad dice as a setup for a scenario, but the idea of a game where all the bad
that's an in-joke for you.
Yeah, but no,
I like it too. I'll play.
Jess is in.
You got one backer already.
Excellent. You know what I mean? That's actually part of the. Obviously, we've got this really robust core scenario. That was the most important thing, because if you read the beta, like supposed it was set up original betas, it was like you've got the persona generation stuff, which is completely free form, and then basically it says GM using the persona stuff, work out what kind of world they go to. And here are some tactics you might want to use. Pick one of these 12 tactics, which might be any good. You know what I mean? It's like, that's a lot of work. It's going to be bad most of the time. So what we ended up taking it down to, like persona gen, like we've got a set of questions that will generate an interesting group every time. And there's other sets of questions. You can always go freeform, but this will definitely give you a group. And then we give you, hey, this is a great method to make a world. This is what you do. And it's easy and accessible and always all that kind of, because some people are always going to be really hard to sort of blend people's lives. And me and Grant, we boiled it down to these are really simple, like rituals. Do this. We promise you it'll be a good time. But then we put all that other stuff, like other ways to make worlds, in a whole section in the back of the book. So like once you've got the kind of core thing down, you add other stuff, play in different ways. And then, we've also got these like more quirky one-off scenarios at the back, which change the setup significantly and do like really kind of like there's one scenario which is basically the group is set up as various people who worked on a comic book together and they've now fell out. So it's completely meta. There's a really good version. I played it with various of my famous comic writing friends, and it's the most truthful I hear about the comic book industry. And the world they go to is a Comic-Con. So you use a Comic-Con map to inspire you at the adventure, etc., etc. So in other words, that's a really set up. That's a set. That wouldn't work for all groups. That only works for that one. And there's a lot of that dice. In other words, your aforementioned evil mechanics game, that's absolutely a perfect way to do die, like being hunted down by the FACO rules or whatever.
I really want to run a game of D&D. I really want to run a game of Die, where all of my old D&D characters and basically every campaign I've abandoned, and they turn up for revenge.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like, where are you, Grant? We've been waiting.
Where have you been? We've been running around the campfire. This has been a very long rest.
So there's this one mechanic we have, like in the weird stuff at the back section instead of the core. Something called I'm not sure it's going to still be called this. It's called the box of crap. But it might be called it was originally called that in the beta, but it's the Geek Oracle. Is that mode? So you put a box. Because anything, there's lots of stuff about using tarot cards, which is great, but anything can be used as an oracle in the right way. So we put a box full of interesting, like, geek stuff, and you draw into it and use it as inspiration for the story. And definitely one of the things I suggest putting there is old character sheets. There's something quite like the existential horror of getting out an old character sheet someone remembers and goes, okay, they're going to turn up,
Your rogue from when you were 15 is here.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And they're disappointed in you.
I'm disappointed in you.
Well, sorry, we've gone way away from the core of Die now.
But that's fine. But I think that shows how flexible the game is, because what you can kind of do with it as well. So that's great. I will drag us back more to the core of it though, because we talked briefly about some of the classes, and we have this absolutely gorgeous artwork here that I want to showcase on the stream as well. And we should definitely talk about the artwork actually, because I think it was redone. Was it Stephanie who worked on it? Who does all the
Stephanie Hans is doing the whole work.
Yeah. my co-creator of Die, like she did all the art in the comic, and she's just basically doing a load of new stuff for the book. Like we wanted to make sure there was like their own iconic cast of paragons instead of just the people from the comic. We'll do a whole new cast, because to show people, oh no, you read the comic, you've got an idea what the Fool may be like or the Neo. Well, let's show you different ways they could be. So Stephanie's completely going for it and giving a whole new cool cast of weirdos.
Absolutely beautiful artwork there as well, just looking through.
We got to make the iconics in an in-house playtest that we did, and so all the characters in the die, I'm like, oh, that's my Godbinder. That's me. That is.
Oh well, that's very cool. That's like some serious art for your campaign there, then.
It's definitely. We do feel we've cheated Stephanie that way, but we win.
Why not?
That's her, isn't it?
That's our friend Saxy. That's Saxy's fault. That's Fool.
So this is the Fool, one of the classes in the game, yeah.
Yeah. The Fool's kind. I mean, all the 6 classes are kind of a riff on one of the core D&D sort of classes, and like the Fool is kind of like the character called the Dictator is one half of the Bard. This is the other half. This is kind of the swashbuckling, playful rogue kind of character. And the Fool's main abilities are they just basically are super luck. As long as they don't take anything seriously, they get loads of bonuses. They can. But they've just not take it seriously. They've got to basically jump in. They've got to basically be that impetuous player. And of course, in a game where everything's meant to be quite serious, that's hard, And the Fool's a great class of people who are a bit more playful. It's one of the more rules-light classes. So it's like, it's very much like if this is how you like to play games, this class is kind of for you. And the thing they get to do, which on their dice is the D6, which of course is the standard dice, which you may think is a bit boring. But what their Fool gets to do is they get to draw on their dice. So you get a marker and you mark in symbols. And if you roll your symbol, a fluke of luck will happen. You know what I mean? So something good will happen. And if you fail to roll that symbol, you add another symbol. So it'll build up to eventually you'll get something lucky for you. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how their dynamic works.
I like it. We have another class that intrigued me here because the name was the Emotion Knight, which sounds very goth, as you mentioned before. You're saying goth Jumanji. Could you talk us through the Emotion Knight and what they do?
Like the Emotion Knight is basically thinking about, how can I do a fighter class? And I end up thinking about paladins. And I'm of an age when I was like playing D&D, you could only have like lawful good paladins. It was that kind of era.
Yeah.
And that always felt weird anyway. And also the idea of religious warriors always felt a bit off in lots of ways, to be honest. And I thought, okay, but I like that structure.
Yeah.
Actually, when I say off, it just felt like incomplete in some way, or unsatisfying. And I found, once doing my research, I found I've got the name, Plutrick, I think his name is, who is a real world psychologist who had the idea of there are 8 emotions. And all the emotions are based around either intensities. So like grief is more intense than sadness. And you know what I mean? So it's 8 emotions. And all of everything else is merging those 8 emotions. And immediately I was like, 8 is the sacred number for fighters anyway. It's the old D8 longsword. It's the 8. It's the 8 on the D&D like grid apart from neutral, which doesn't count. So like this 8 is a magical number. There's a lot about numerology in Die, or not real numerology, the numerology of fantasy games. And so I say, there's 8 orders of knights, each one about these emotions. So you've got grief knights, you've got terror knights, you've got ecstasy knights. And each one of them, they are more powerful the more they feel their sacred emotion. So like a grief knight, which is the one in the comic, if they feel profoundly sad, they can just kill dragons in a second in that way. And so it's all about, and the way the emotion knights work, it's normally you choose your emotion in character creation. So you're basically picking the emotion, which is really about your persona's problem. So if a character's like really angry, you might pick Rage Knight, or you might, if you're incapable of expressing rage in the real world, maybe then you press Rage Knight, and the story becomes, can they get in contact with their rage? And they're kind of like, they're two abilities. They've got like, they've got this arcane, it all comes with an arcane weapon, which is sentient and talks to you and tries to urge you to, it wants you to do your emotion.
Amazing.
And they've got 2 levels. Their basic abilities is like a selection of like fighter class abilities, really. Which there's some cool stuff because you've got stances linked to your whatever emotion you have. So you've got things like choose one that like if you're in an awareness night or whatever, you're always aware of, if you're in this stance, you're always aware if someone's looking at you, that kind of thing. Or like the or the rage night, one of their stances I think is they can I've literally forgot how we did the rules, but it's basically you basically can kill someone with a glance in that kind of, you wouldn't mess with me.
Wow, something to aspire to there.
Yeah. But then the high level ability, something called creative violence, is when you burn up all your energy and you basically there's a list of depending on how much of the emotion you're feeling, you've got a different nouns you're going to feed, and it's like low, like I think level 2 might be a weakness. So, or you can defeat a city, or you can defeat, these are quite broad nouns, and that means you can do it. And this is like I think level 3 is at least has an army, and level 5 you're hitting stuff like truth,
mountains.
Yeah, you know what I mean. And they burn up all their energy in one go, and of course it may kill you, and it may kill everyone else. But that's the ultimate warrior kind of moment where you kind of
the cover of the book actually is a vigilance knight doing their creative violence.
So this picture here.
Yeah. So you can see Stephanie did all the eyes for vigilance. We figured that was the most exciting thing to show on the cover was a vigilance knight, like popping.
Yeah. I mean, when I was originally trying to do the playtest, the rules, they never ever touched the D8 except when they were using creative violence. So I wanted that samurai moment you drew the sword. In the end, it didn't work as much as I like. It sounds great, doesn't it? You have to roll it, but in the end, people just like rolling their D8. So I end up using it elsewhere as well. But that is what it feels like when they go for creative violence. Everyone backs off because they know, oh right,
they're like, whoa, it's happening.
Yeah. It's on.
Nice. So we talked in depth about 2 of the classes there, but there's many more in the game as we've discussed. But if Grant, if you were to pick a class that you feel represents you, which one would you pick from the game?
Well,
if that's
I really like the Fool.
Question. Of course,
because I feel like I've really made a career of not taking things seriously.
Okay,
But I think the one which speaks to me, the one which I played in the playtest, the Godbinder, and I've always found, much like Kieran, like the role of religion in role-playing games hasn't quite rung true for me. It hasn't quite landed. Especially seeing as like your average pally, your average cleric, is either a good-looking fighter who doesn't quite have as many maneuvers, or someone who medkits fall out of. And their relationship with their god isn't ever really explored. And like, I've always found it fascinating, like to devote your life to something in that way. And so to the Godbinder, rather than devoting their life to a god, they treat them as a warlock. So it's like
a patron thing,
Yeah, precisely. And like my game Heart, which I wrote with Chris Taylor, it's a dungeon crawler game, and basically every class is a different flavor of warlock. You're siphoning power from something that doesn't want you to siphon power from it. The Godbinder is very similar to that in a lot of ways. And so when you make your Godbinder, it's like you're not stealing it in the same way. Like it's a more cordial relationship. You're like a broker. But you get to define the gods. And that's really neat because, like, Kieran's got a list of like the 6 starter gods and 6 difficult gods which come in afterwards. But like, there's the war god, the god of light, the eldritch god, the nature god, and they give you these little abilities which you get, and then also you can get freeform miracles if you want. Like, if you want to turn into a bear, great, that's the nature god. If you want everyone to turn into a bear, that's a miracle. But it's doable.
Okay,
And because you're creating the gods, because you're sort of answering these questions, it means that it's not right here are the gods of die and you'll have your relationship with this. It's the same as everything else in the world. Is that it's made out of your fascinations, made out of your terrors. And so my god of light was played by Miss Ellie Goulding, because my character really liked her music, and I always thought there was something sort of like faintly ethereal about her.
That makes sense.
And so whenever I start casting light spells, starry-eyed Bailey Goulding sort of comes in over that would be the hymn that you'd sing. I really like the level of customization that it brings.
And the game I ran on Monday, there was some picked the Eldritch God, and they and as their persona basically used to read like the Red Wall books when they were younger, but they refused to admit only reading them anymore. So their Eldritch God was the very angry, vengeful rat demons. Basically felt abandoned. The rats. They were you abandoned us, you ignored us. Now you're paying blood. Bring us blood. That kind of like. And then the Eldritch God. It's all about. So it's weird, like children's literature as Eldritch God. And this, of course, is just from the characters. So you take the back. Instead of having these gods which just random stuff in the world, these gods become personal. And the great thing is they're just NPCs as well. So like I'd say, it's about miracles is about deals. Well, whether that deal is depends on what the god's like. And just because they are quote unquote the war god doesn't mean they're all the same. Like, and that's one of the fun things. The more you play in a longer campaign, you're like, these gods both become your source of power, but also antagonists and NPCs. If it's all really good material, and it just comes from those kind of ideas. Sorry, Grant.
No, it's fine. They can turn it whenever you like as well because they're gods,
Yeah.
which is wonderful.
That's handy.
In fact,
if the godbinder picks up their
brain.
D12, they can always address their gods. That's one of the things they can do. Yeah.
Sounds excellent. Do you have another question I'll jump in is, do you have any other stories from playtesting, in particular standout cool moments? I don't know how you're going to be Ellie Goulding, singing music story, but no? Okay.
There's a lot of pop music. I did a scenario that was set at the Reading, the band were all they were basically a band who used to play this RPGs when they were touring, and they were on the way to the Reading Festival. Was the car crash, and I remember their band died. So when they went into, then they get back together years later, they play a game, and the die world they get sucked to is based on the Reading Festival. So I used the Reading Festival bill of that year as the setting. So they're trying to get backstage, and backstage I have Bowie backstage as this kind of demonic lord of it all. The very fair, and just with the players literally the players were screaming in utter delight and amazement, and that's kind of the joy of one of the good things about Dyers. Oh, but it's the persona, and you talk about their obsessions, but some of your stuff always creeps in as well. And you know what I mean? And it's that's what I love about when it's really personal and weird, and the abilities build up. I mean, I like to give it like the first full die campaign I played, which is like a big kind of like 35-40 session game, and obviously a longer game is always like, I mean, what's like. Die course normally like 2 to 4 sessions, and so there's various different ways. But you can play it a full campaign. It's full advancement rules and stuff. Yeah. And the whole kind of game was based around, will everyone get back to Earth or not? And it's all based basically whether the master could use their abilities. It was like a player would have to kill another player to return to life and go back, and they wouldn't do it. I just can't kill you. You're my friend. And the master said, okay, I'm going to try to cheat to see if we can get us all back. And it's basically if a master's have any cheat tokens, the basic is a really simple mechanic. You put the D20 in your hand, and somebody has to guess which hand it's in. And if they find it, the judges will find it, and if they don't, they don't. So we have this.
Can you do any cheating with that? Can you be like,
that would be cheating and rude. It was literally we've been playing for this like an entire year and change, and it all comes down to which dice is this? The player picks. Everyone goes back to real world. I open the hand. They pick the dice. So one of the players is dead in the real world because she was trying to save everybody. And everyone was obviously it was hard. And everyone's like, and it was the person who dragged them in. So it was kind of quote unquote their fault, but it wasn't. But at the same time,
did they deserve to die?
No, absolutely not. Literally, I think the line she said just before doing is the problem with becoming a better person is you have to be a better person. And so like she had a complete character arc. And honestly, we had to stop having. I did give her. There was a kind of happy ending in the epilogue for her, and that yes, she was trapped in Dyer's Lord of Hell, and she kind of liked that, and that's fine because she was very gothic. But you know what I mean? That the idea was all after so much work as basically pick which hand, and everyone was in that moment. That shows me that's one of my favorite sessions ever. But Dyer, every time I play, it's just always so rewarding. Like when I've been playing for like 5 years now, I think that says something about the game. So I'm excited by it. I'm really happy to share it with people.
Yeah, it's so great to see the Kickstarter campaign doing so well. I saw it, and that's why I reached out to ask you to be on the show. So thank you so much for giving up your time to come and talk about it. If you are watching and you're thinking, hey, this sounds pretty good, you can go on to Kickstarter. The project is live now. At the time of recording, it's over $250,000 raised. And when this goes out, it'll probably be much, much more than that. But the link is in the show notes. You can go check that out. Die the role-playing game there. If, as this show wasn't live, you haven't been able to ask your questions and answers, but you can bother these fine people on social media with your questions. I'm sure they'll answer them. So Facebook and Instagram, you've got Rowan, Rook and Deckard, and on Twitter, it's Rowan, Rook, Deckard. And we've also got the website there as well with the links. If people want to bother you with questions as well, Grant, where can they bother you?
So we have a really good Discord, which I realise I can't. Oh, wow!
Which I have the link for. How professional!
Wow!
The link for that will be in the show notes as well for Discord.
Go there because that's quite good. Especially if you've got any questions about anything. I'm also on Twitter at @GSHowitt, which is what I use most of the time. Is kind of one of our main promotional things. So if you want something quick there, but I mean, I think really, if you've got a question, my first advice to you would be to back the Kickstarter and then contact me through the comments and back it for a lot of money. and then contact me. We'll definitely see if it's in the comments, okay?
Excellent, great. So definitely go and back the campaign. It's something I've done. I'm very much looking forward to getting a game of that get in. So thank you so much for coming on the show to talk to us. Is there anything that you wanted to say that you didn't get the chance to?
No, we're good, I think.
No?
It's
Covered
like,
everything.
it's like
we've been quite authentically excited.
Yeah,
I am. That's why I ask people on the show because I see the game and I like it, and it's interesting to me because there's so many different games and stuff on Kickstarter at the moment. So I am genuinely excited about the game.
No, it's like it's a lot of stuff, and that's Great Joy of Die. It's just a bunch of stuff, and it's kind of our love. When I was writing, it's meant to be. This is why I like RPGs, and it's a bit of everything. And then and it's not okay. That's not quite true, but it's basically a portrait of stuff I like and think why games are amazing. How they're this democratic, creative form that makes us, empowers us. And so I'm really excited. Fantastic. Well, check out the Kickstarter campaign and back it there, because the best way to support indie tabletop RPG creators is to buy their stuff. So please do that. Next week on Not D&D, we have another indie creator on. We have Love and Barbed Wire. So Alex White is coming on to chat to us next week on the 6th of June at 10 p.m. BST. But if you're thinking, Jess, I can't wait a whole week, that's fine. Don't you worry. On this channel here, we have the Starcross Seaway episode, which is the penultimate episode. So you can check out Level Up Advanced 5th edition. And on Thursday, we have the Awfully Cheerful Engine with the excellently named Accidentally Anthropomorphic Animal Heroes one-shot happening on Thursday as well. And I said that in one take. You can get that on there. But thank you very much for coming to see an episode of Not D&D. Kieron, Grant, thank you so much, and best of luck with the campaign. Thank you very much. You're very kind. Lovely to be here.